Recording
the
in
Women and Gender
progress.
Rights Forum. She holds the position, and she's currently she started a career. She's in children's rights and she's a women's rights activist, and she started a career at the Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town. Throughout her career, she has focused on policy drafting, research analysis, and synthesis to advance a transformative agenda, which is in line with South Africa's national transformation objectives. She has also focused on analyzing policy and implementation weaknesses and disjunctures across a broad variety of developmental policies. Currently, she serves in the office of the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP as manager and project leader for sectoral parliaments. She participated in the process to review the 1994 Women's Charter for effective equality, equality, my apologies. She also co-authored the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. Sibu holds a PhD from the University of Cape Town, and a master's degree also from the University of Cape Town, and focusing on the rhetorical studies. We want to thank her for her time. She is one of the most eminent persons in the administration and parliament when it comes to women's rights and gender-based violence. And we are also very honored to have her here today. Sibu, if you can also just show your face, if you haven't done so already, so that our participants can see who you are. With that, colleague, very accomplished group of panelists for today's session, very exciting. I would like to, if Ms. Mashele is on the platform, we'll give her first opportunity to start with her presentation. Can I just confirm whether she's joined us at this stage? Not yet. Look, I received an email from Ms. Mashele indicating that she's having technical issues on her side. Okay. Is Ms. Biela has indicated that she cannot show her face. So I don't know, colleagues, Sandy and Iksan, if we can assist. I don't know where the video, if you can assist her on with the video, but we are ready to start with her presentation. Ms. Sinikiwe, can I ask, are you able to share your presentation? Are you able to share, Sini?
Madam Chair, it doesn't seem to have a lot of options where we can click videos or actually click that button that says share the presentation. So I've got only limited icons here like chat, raise your hand, question and answer, and then mute button only. I don't have other buttons.
Okay.
Maybe now.
My apologies, Sandy, can I just ask?
Yes, I was just trying to promote her to panelist. Have you accepted, Sini?
Yes.
Sini? You are now a panelist.
Thank you very much.
Also win?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now I can share and I can probably show my face as well.
Great. Sandy, can I just ask when Ms. Mashele from the Civilian Secretariat, I will try and see offline if I can communicate with her in the meantime, but just keep an eye out so that we can also promote her to panelists as soon as she joins, and also Dr. Mfulane in the meantime, if she's not already a panelist. I think I did indicate her name. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can you disable participant screen sharing? It says it's disabled.
Sandy, are you able to? Okay, let me change that to multiple participants can share. Are you able to share now?
I believe
Yeah.
so.
It's starting up, Sini. Thank you so much.
Good morning, colleagues. I believe you can now see my presentation. Maybe I just need to check if everybody can see it. Are
Sini, can
you-
we just
Yes,
ask you
yes,
to?
yes.
Yeah, there we go. Great. Colleagues, at this stage, I'm also gonna close my camera and thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. As our chair, Berenice, have introduced me, I'm Sinikiwe Biela, and I'm from Lifeline Pietermaritzburg. I will be sharing briefly the barriers or the structural barriers to gender-based violence and why, as a country, we don't seem to be winning in fighting some of these issues. But a bit of the background, Lifeline Pietermaritzburg works in 5 districts, as they're showing there in Mukungundlovu, Herekwala, Utuyela, Mzinyathi, and Majuba. And most of the data that we're going to be presenting comes from these 5 districts. Plus, it's also the information that is coming from other NGOs that are working in KwaZulu-Natal that we collaborate with and we have meetings with, and also some of the Lifeline centers that are based at a national level that we do talk about these issues. So it's not only what we've seen in Lifeline Pietermaritzburg, but it also represents some of the things that had happened in other provinces as well. In terms of the cases, my presentation is based on what has happened in the last year between 2022 and 2023 statistics and a bit of 2024. So this is just to give a background that when we talk about gender-based violence, in Mukungundlovu alone, between 2023 and 2024, we supported 4,086 survivors of gender-based violence. And in Mzinyathi, there were 2,490. In Herekwala, there were 2,007 survivors. In Utugela, 2,631. And in the Majuba district, there were 2,101 survivors that were supported. This is just to give a background of where the issues they're coming from as Lifeline. And the common trends that we've seen in the last 12 months is, in the last 12 months, we've noticed the following issues, especially around gender-based violence. In total, survivors that were supported, there are about 13,315, and 75% of the rape cases that we supported involved children under the age of 16. And what we've also seen, the youngest rape survivor that we have dealt with was a 2-week-old baby that passed away a few days later after that rape had happened. And that was last year in October. And the oldest survivor that we have assisted last year was a 96-year-old woman. This state just shows that, again, the myth that people get raped because of how they dress or how they look, it's completely wrong, because when you look at the ages of this survivor that is 96-year-old and the 2-week-old baby, it just shows that GBV is blind. It does not see the age, it does not see class, it does not see educational levels. It just attacks all the people that are vulnerable at that particular time. And also, one of the trends that we've picked up is that most perpetrators are known to the survivors, either their family members or a neighbor or somebody from church or somebody that lives or that is an extended family member or a cousin. But about 80% of our survivors are actually raped or abused by people that they know. We have also seen a rise in the number of younger perpetrators that are actually perpetrating serious crimes like rape. In this year alone, 2024, we had about 16 incidences of gang rape that is happening in one of the townships in Pietermaritzburg, in Edendale area, which is very concerning because, again, it just shows that gang rape is rising on another level. And lastly, in terms of trends, we've also come across a number of rape survivors that have been assaulted or raped by sangomas or traditional healers, as well as church leaders. And how the rape with sangomas is currently happening, survivors are told by the sangomas that the ancestors have decided, the survivor ancestor and the sangoma ancestor have decided to marry each other. And because they've decided to do that, then it means now they must actually go to bed. Unfortunately, survivors that are involved in this kind of rape are girls that are as young as 14 or 13. The youngest girl that we've dealt with 2 weeks ago was 14 years old, and she fell pregnant because the sangoma had said this, but she did not only rape her, she also raped her older sister using the same strategies. So we can see that perpetrators, again, they do not choose the color of the role that the person is playing in the community. Anyone actually can be the perpetrator. And unfortunately, our community still believes and trusts sangomas or traditional healers or church leaders a lot, that whatever they say to them goes, it becomes a gospel. And you could see that actually there is a need of educating them about these things, because we're seeing a number of cases now coming up that involve such schemes where they get raped. This slide just shows the youngest survivor, the youngest perpetrator that we have dealt with. This is a boy that is 12 years old that we have actually seen. We were caught by the school saying in his LO book, this is what he's drawing when they're supposed to be studying. He actually draws this picture here. It's a picture of the woman crying, and it's written in isiZulu saying, I'm sorry. She's apologizing and begging for her life. And this man here is actually saying, no, I'm done with you now. And I said, remove your clothes. And he's asking for the other person, like the friend in the corner there, to say, pass me my gun. So this 12-year-old boy was caught by the community trying to rape an 80-plus old woman. And he got upset because the community caught him, and this is what he was doing in his LO books. So again, this is just give the common trends of how big the problem is when it comes to gender-based violence. And also, as we're doing this dialogue today, we really need to think what else that needs to be done. If 12-year-old boys are now attacking 80-plus old women and trying to rape them, and even after they've been caught, they go on and still, there were a lot of pictures that he drew, but I decided to just take this one for today's conversation to say he still has an idea that what he's doing, the woman is going to be begging for her life, and you can see the tears there, and you can see the woman saying, I'm sorry, but he's going to be using other things like guns to continue perpetrating this crime on this woman. So moving on to the intimate partner violence, also we have seen an increase on the cases of intimate partner violence, and the brutality that goes with it, it's also on the increase. Many years ago, women used to be just beaten up by their partners, and it will end there. But now they get beaten up and they get killed during that process. This picture here is a picture of one of the survivors that we have assisted that was beaten up by her partner, even though she had a protection order. And the partner came with a bush knife. And while she was protecting her head, because he was coming with a bush knife to actually chop her head, then her thumb got choked. So you could see that the brutality as well, it's gone on the extreme levels. And it's very worrisome that perpetrators at the current moment, they do not seem to be scared of the law, because this man had a protection order against him, but he still went forward, and we perpetrated this woman, even though we knew that the protection order was in place. In our work that we have done, we also tried to look at what could be the structural barriers for gender-based violence, and why we're not seeing the drop, even though there are some implementation that is being done by government departments, by different organizations, but we don't seem to be winning the fight against the stage. So Lifeline have looked at what are the barriers that our clients come to us every day and complain about. And of course, DNA takes number one on the list in terms of the barriers. And in South Africa currently, we have 4 DNA laboratories that are actually owned by the state. We have one in Pretoria and one in Cape Town. Then we have 2 smaller ones in KZN and Gqeberha. And that's why I put them in brackets, because the size of the specimen that they deal with, it's actually it's not a lot compared to the Pretoria and the Cape Town laboratories. And if we have 4 laboratories in the country, the question is, how come as a country we are not then willing to actually deal with this cry when it comes to DNA analysis and the results when survivors have to wait for years and years? So of course, it's clear why as a country we're not winning that fight, because if you look at what these 4 laboratories are expected to do, it's a lot. These 4 laboratories are expected to render all forensic science analysis, such as ballistics, the firearm analysis, question documentation analysis, where they look at the documents and they analyze those documents for fraudulent activities. They also do victim identification, for example, when there are big accidents or floods and there are a lot of dead bodies, and they have to identify them and link them up with the family members. They also do chemistry, that is the analysis of like drug analysis, poison analysis, fire investigation analysis. Then they do biological fluids, and that is the fluids that are taken during the crime scene, or the evidence that is taken during the crime scene. And that's where our DNA analysis for the rape survivors comes in. It falls under that biological fluid analysis. And then they also do other scientific analysis like animal DNA and image analysis. So if you look at that alone, you could see that if we only have 4 laboratories in South Africa, then they are inundated with work. And the DNA for rape survivors, or the DNA analysis for the rape survivors, it's then it becomes part and parcel of all these other DNAs or all the analysis that needs to be done. And unfortunately, at the moment, it is not being prioritized that it will jump the queue if it's a rape case, that analysis will be done first and other DNA will follow at the end. Unfortunately, they all join the same queue, and that's where we see that survivors are not getting the justice that they deserve. And most of the DNA laboratories do not have enough staff as well. And of course, because of that, and all other cases are important, GBV cases are not prioritized, and they do not get processed timelessly in order to ensure the conviction rate for the rape perpetrators. And that is very concerning, because in 2022, our president had declared gender-based violence as the first pandemic in the country. And if gender-based violence is a first pandemic following COVID, the question is, why are we not seeing some of these things being done early enough so that we can curb the scourge of gender-based violence? Why are we not seeing processes where DNA laboratories are fast-tracking DNA analysis of the rape survivors so that the results could be out and perpetrators could actually go to jail? So moving on with the DNA and what are the issues currently, the previous slide was just showing what is happening in the labs and why the results are delayed. And it's very important that we also note that delayed DNA results equals to no justice for the survivors of rape. Basically, justice has been denied for them. In 2022-2023, there were 3,216 rape cases that were withdrawn from the court roll pending DNA analysis. So what happens, we always educate communities, we educate children in schools that if rape happens, do not take a shower, you need to go immediately to the hospital for medical examination and for DNA purposes. And a number of people are aware of this information. It has got to the level where they understand that they need to go to the hospital. But what is what becomes problematic and discouraging for the survivors is that even if they've gone to the hospital within 72 hours and the DNA swabs were taken, but it takes so many years for the swabs to come back or for the results to come back. And most of these cases, while they're waiting for DNA results, they get withdrawn from court. And when they get withdrawn from court, the perpetrator gets released, or sometimes he's already released on bail by the time the case gets withdrawn. But sometimes you find that the perpetrator was still in the holding cells, and when the case gets withdrawn, pending DNA, then the perpetrator also gets released on bail. And most of these cases affect minor children because DNA for a 2-year-old child or 5-year-old child that has been raped, DNA is the main evidence that can be used to actually put the perpetrator behind bars, because we know that age group can't really tell long stories in terms of what happens. But what is currently happening in South Africa, it takes more than 2 years for the DNA results to come back. And we also know that DNA specimen is valid for 6 months, and thereafter it starts deteriorating. And when it gets analyzed a year later, the quality of that specimen is not the same as when the DNA specimen was analyzed 6 months earlier. So when it gets analyzed 1.5 years later, the quality is not sometimes there, and the results comes back inconclusive, meaning they couldn't really find anything to link the perpetrator with in order for the case to move forward. And basically those results become unusable. And about 70% of the DNA results come back inconclusive, but that is already 2 years later, when the survivor has been waiting for 2 years, hoping at some point the perpetrator is going to be arrested. And most of the times, because of the lack of DNA evidence, and because rape cases don't have witnesses, the perpetrators are found not guilty and they get released and they go back to the communities. What we have seen in our experience, when they go back in the communities, they go and perpetrate more younger children, because now it's a known fact in the communities that if you rape a child, you'll get away with it because of simply DNA is not going to come back and the child will not be able to stand that court trial. So as Lifeline, what we feel needs to be done differently, because this issue of DNA is really discouraging a lot of people, and they feel that even if they go and open a case, what's the point? Even if they go within 72 hours, results are not going to be back. And because the results are not back, the conviction rate when it comes to rape cases, it's actually very, very low. I think it's between 4 to 8%, the conviction rate. It is very discouraging. If the DNA can be fast-tracked, the conviction rates, we believe as Lifeline, can increase. Maybe it even reach 60% or even 80%. Then it will actually send a strong message to the perpetrators that this is not acceptable. So what we believe as Lifeline could be done differently is the review of the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act, number 13 of 2021, to include turnaround time for the DNA analysis and the results. Because if you look at the Sexual Offences Act, it gives a good guide in terms of what needs to happen with the survivors of rape and how these cases should be managed. But because it doesn't have a time frame as to when DNA should come back, it's left open for people to actually do as they please. If people feel they can analyze it 2 years later, hey, for them, it's still not a problem. They analyze it 2 years later, but forgetting that by that time, the specimen has deteriorated. So we strongly believe turnaround time is very important. And unless it's part of the act, people are not going to be held accountable because it's not going to be written anyway. But if it's part of that act, then we'll be able to hold all role players, including officials, accountable. We also believe DNA results should be available within 3 months. If as a country, we are serious about ending the scourge of gender-based violence, we can't actually have results coming back 2 or 3 years later and knowing very well that will come back showing nothing. Not so long ago, we had we're sitting in one of our meetings, and we learned that one of the courts that we work with had 100 DNA results coming back all at the same time. And this one prosecutor was so excited that results came back. It means now cases are going to be moving forward. And only to learn that only 20% of those cases that came back had valid DNA. The rest was unusable. It was inconclusive. So that's what we're saying when we say it doesn't actually help survivors when it's left for too long. And we strongly believe that if we are serious about ending the scourge, each province should have its own functional DNA laboratories. And in South Africa at the moment, we want to believe that we have DNA labs, but the truth is they are not functional to fast track gender-based violence cases so that perpetrators can be put behind bars. So we're saying each province should have a small lab that will just specialize on GBV cases and make sure that cases actually dealt with as early as possible. And we're saying if the country doesn't have funds to actually establish those small laboratories, but then partner with other private labs so that at least we can get these results timelessly, because this whole thing of not getting DNA results in time, for us, it is a human rights issue, because people are not safe and people's lives are at danger. So because it's a human rights issue, we believe it should be prioritized and it should be dealt with accordingly. Then the next thorn in our skin is the bail conditions. You will recall that last year on the 9th of August, 2023, our president announced, it was the Women's Day and we were all celebrating. He announced that there'll be no bail for the GBV perpetrators. So we all celebrated, we were all excited that finally now there'll be a strong message sent to the perpetrators of gender-based violence. However, sadly, perpetrators are still being granted bail. There is no day when you go to court with GBV cases where perpetrators are not given bail. Most of the perpetrators are still granted bail. So while our justice system have excellent processes such as applying for protection order, but bail condition does not have a built-in warrant of arrest, which makes it even more difficult for the survivors of gender-based violence, especially now the intimate partner violence when they've been violated. The law makes provisions for the survivors to be given copies of their bail conditions, but most survivors, when you interview them, they'll tell you, I don't even know the bail condition. I saw that he's out and he's swearing me every day and is coming and threatening me, but they don't know that this person should be behaving in a certain way because they don't have those conditions. So it is quite actually sad that at the end of the day, while the survivors have made means to open cases and end the scourge, but the justice system at times keeps them in the dark because they don't know it's their case, but nobody tells them anything, even though it is their case and they deserve to know. So we have perpetrators that have breached bail conditions as soon as they come out of the prison and they go and threaten survivors. But at times, some perpetrators will go and commit similar crimes. Like we have cases of people that have history of raping kids that got bail and they went and they raped again and they still got another bail. So you could see that actually there is a big problem with a bail and its conditions in terms of the community knowing about it, but also at what stage do we stop granting bail if people have repeated incidences of rape that they've committed in the community? So we believe that bail condition should have that built-in warrant of arrest, because when it doesn't have the built-in warrant of arrest, what normally happens, survivors will go open the first case, let's say, of domestic violence, and the perpetrator will be arrested. 2 days later, will be granted bail, he'll be asked. But he goes back and he violates the same perpetrator. And now the survivor is expected to go open another case, and he or she gets allocated a different investigating officer because now this is a new case, and they get allocated a new case number. And even when it goes to court, they get allocated a different prosecutor from that original case. So the survivor end up with 2 cases running concurrently instead of having, for example, if the person has breached bail condition, that person should be arrested immediately. But that doesn't happen because bail conditions, they don't have built-in warrants of arrest. They don't work like a protection order. If you breach the protection order, you get arrested immediately because protection order have a built-in warrant of arrest. And we are saying, as organizations that are working in the space of gender-based violence, if we want to improve some of the issues that we are faced with as a country, we really need to look at having bail conditions with built-in warrant of arrest so that survivors, they don't go start the process all over again. And when the case is not continuing, it is a secondary victimization for the survivors. And most of the times, that discourages them in a way, just forces survivors to withdraw the charges because at times they feel, what is the point? I opened the case, the person is out, and now I must go open another case that the person came out and terrorized me. So they get discouraged and they actually stop. So we feel what needs to be done differently is that bail conditions should be built in a similar way like how we have a protection order. We believe the justice system should ensure that GBV survivors is given a copy of bail conditions and they are protected, because right now they get told the police officer was supposed to give it to you. The police officer says no, the prosecutor was supposed to give it to you. So it is not clear whose responsibility it is to give the copy of the bail conditions to the survivor. And we believe the survivor owns the case, therefore the survivor has a right to actually be given the conditions of bail. In the event that the bail conditions are breached by the perpetrator, the GBV survivor should be able to call the existing investigating officer and report the matter, and the person should be arrested immediately, but the same prosecutor should be dealing with this second offense instead of moving it to the different one. And that perpetrator should not be given bail again, because that's not fair. Then the third structural issue that we've seen involves withdrawal of GBV cases that involves children. Currently, as we said earlier on, 75% of rape victims are children, and the bulk of them are under the age of 10. And unfortunately, they wait between 3 to 5 years for their court cases to go through trial. And at that time, the children, they are being intimidated by perpetrators, and sometimes they repress the traumatic incidences because it's hard to actually keep remembering it. And sometimes 3 years later, they can't remember the smallest details of what happened. And therefore, you find that those cases again get withdrawn from court pending DNA, which is a secondary victimization. But sometimes you find that perpetrators get acquitted because the child does not remember the details or the smallest details of rape. So we believe what needs to be done differently is that rape cases for children under the age of 12 should be prioritized in courts. Specialized courts and specialized prosecutors in managing children's cases, it's key. And we're saying specialized prosecutors because we've sat in court and we've heard how prosecutors at times terrorize these minor survivors. They ask them such rude questions that children will break down in court and the case will not continue. So we feel that prosecutors need to be trained in a certain way, especially the ones that are going to be managing children's cases, because it's not doing any justice to them that the perpetrator got acquitted and goes back to the community and rape more children, because now perpetrators know that children can't stand trial because the prosecutors are not too nice to them, but also the case took long to come to court. So we believe we need to fast track the DNA results that are involving minor children, especially, for example, put a barcode, whether it's going to be a red barcode on that DNA box, so that everybody that end up with this box knows that this box here, it's an agent matter that needs to be dealt with so that these cases can go back. And that will increase accountability and a sense of agency, because right now we believe there is no sense of agency in the way these cases are dealt with. But also what we are asking for is that more weight in court should be placed on the survivor statement, medical evidence, as well as social workers' reports instead of DNA. Because what is currently happening in court, when there's a rape case and it involves the child, they wait for the DNA. But we know that while they're waiting for DNA, there'll be no DNA results that will come conclusive because of the time it takes to analyze the results. So we are saying we need to see this thing being changed. We would like to see the emphasis placed more on the child's statement, on the medical evidence, which includes doctors and nurses, because they do look at the evidence, as well as the social workers' reports. There should be enough to keep the case going instead of withdrawing it pending the DNA, because currently they get withdrawn pending the DNA, and we're encouraging the justice system, or would like this message to get to the justice system, that we cannot withdraw these cases pending DNA, because DNA in South Africa, it's a big mess, it's a chaos. So we can't wait for it. We need to find other ways of dealing with the issue at hand without actually traumatizing our survivors further, and without doing secondary victimization on them. And we believe if Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act gets reviewed so that it's expanded and to deal with children's issues, and it stipulates how a child case should be dealt with, we believe we will see better results. And the last one, in terms of the barriers, is the statutory rape and the teenage pregnancy. As a country, we know in April, between April and March 2023, we had over 150,000 teenagers that were pregnant in South Africa. Lifeline currently supports 30 new cases of teen mothers per month, which amounts to 360 per annum. And the youngest mother was 11 years old. And what is concerning is that the fathers of these children are people that are between the ages of 20, 30, even 40. We had an 11-year-old child that was being dated by a 45-year-old man that was taking her out and having a relationship with this child. But the law around statutory rape, it's very clear. There's no confusion with the law, but it's not being implemented by the role players, especially in the health facilities and SAPS. They are the ones that are delivering these babies. Nurses and doctors are the ones that are assisting these young girls. And the law, the Children's Act, states clearly, if you suspect any abuse, report it. And the question is why nurses and doctors are actually exempted from this law, because basically they are exempted. They're not reporting it and nothing is being done. When we have Children's Act stating clearly what needs to be done, we have statutory rape stating clearly what needs to be done. So we feel pressure needs to be put on Department of Health to report these incidences, and for SAPS to open those cases, because sometimes you find nurses and doctors that are good that will report these cases, but SAPS then goes and say, oh, they were in a relationship, did you agree to sleep with him? And the 13-year-old says yes, but then they say there's no case. But how a 13-year-old can agree into having a sexual relationship with a 40-year-old man, and we think there is no case? So we feel doctors don't want to report because of doctor-patient confidentiality, and we feel if that doctor-patient confidentiality compromises the life of a child, that needs to be reviewed, and those cases need to be taken on, because they are protected by Children's Act, and we can't allow all the men to predate on these young girls. So we believe what needs to be done differently. We need to start, because right now the focus is on the pregnant girl, and we're pushing the blame and the responsibility once again to a woman. And why would an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old make herself pregnant? So we feel currently the responsibility should be on these adults, men that are predating on girls and sleeping with them. And South Africans need to actually stand up firm on this issue, and cases must be opened and they should be arrested, because we all have a legal responsibility to report child abuse. We believe that health workers should be forced to report child abuse incidences in accordance with Children's Act, and because the Act supersedes doctor-patient confidentiality. So these issues should be raised. Legal action should be taken against the older men that are impregnating girls, and legal action should be taken against biological parents and guardians for turning the blind eye, because we're also aware that some guardians and parents are turning a blind eye because these older men come with groceries, and we know part of the problem is poverty and high unemployment rate in South Africa. But we can't also allow parents to prostitute their own children because of poverty and unemployment rates. And we believe a strong message should be sent out to the community so that children are not passports to become rich, because currently it looks like girls in particular have become a passport for parents to have food on the table. And we believe as a country we need to do something. Shortly or briefly, these are other structural barriers that we've picked up. Issues around protection orders. I think the main issue is the fact that sometimes you find that the clerks in the court, while survivors have a right to get a protection order, but when they go to the clerk in the court, the clerk will say, oh, but how many times he had beaten you up? If the lady says once, the clerk will say, oh, you must have kind of like a history of events before you come and open a protection order, which is a big issue because they need to be educated. Then the other issue that we're seeing, our president declared gender-based violence as a first pandemic, but our tertiary institutions are lagging behind.
My apologies, Sinikiwe. Can 2 minutes to wind down?
Okay, thank you. So social workers need to be trained on gender-based violence, and currently their curriculum at the university level does not include gender-based violence, and we end up with social workers that don't know how best to support the survivors, which is a bit of an issue. And children's homes are also full because children are the ones that get removed from home when rape happened, and we saying perpetrators should be removed from home and we should leave children in the same environment that they're familiar with, and they must continue with their schooling, because what is happening, it affects their schooling. And of course, issues around patriarchal cultural attitude and poverty are some of the issues that makes it worse for the gender-based violence, and that's why we're not fighting it or winning in fighting this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Lifeline Pietermaritzburg for that very sobering presentation. I'm sure there will be lots of discussion. I've been receiving comments on my personal WhatsApp, and yeah, it is quite overwhelming. So thank you so much. Next on immediately, I will hand over to Ms. Lillian Mashele from the Civilian Secretariat for Police. I want to just apologize. Lillian's got another commitment, so we would be receiving a brief overview of her full presentation, but we will put both presentations in the chat, and we've also forwarded to the Civilian Secretariat and the South African Police Service. We've also taken proactively forwarded this presentation now to colleagues, the relevant colleagues. So thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge the colleagues from the Justice and Police committees providing support here, and I'm sure that they will use this information to inform Parliament's oversight. So immediately over to Lillian Mashele. Thank you. Thank you, Sinikiwe. Lillian, you may start sharing your presentation.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much, Bernice. I'm trying to find the tab to share my presentation.
Can I just ask the colleagues on the platform, can we just assist to make Lillian Mashele also a host so she can share? Give her those. Give her the rights to share. Are you able to share now, Lillian?
I have done that, Berenice. I've given a...
Thank you. Lillian, are you able to see? You've withdrawn your sharing, right? Your presentation?
I should be able to share my screen now.
Lillian, can I just, I'm not sure if it's just from my side, but there's something, your sound.
There's some static.
Yeah, there's some static there with your sound. Thanks. It's not, the sound is not good at all. Can you maybe just move around, or your bandwidth is low, it says, and it indicate you have a problem on your side. Lillian? if Lillian, are you able to resolve your IT challenges on your side?
Colleagues,
Okay.
am I? Oh,
No, we unfortunately cannot, we don't see your screen, Lillian, and we cannot, there's a lot of static on your side. You did indicate this morning that you're having some ICT challenges on your side. If you are not able to share, we will have to then reschedule, or if we cannot resolve the audio issues on your side. Okay?
okay. So I've shared the screen, so you let me know if you're able to view the screen. But more importantly, I just want to know if colleagues are able to hear me.
The sound is not very clear, a lot of static.
But maybe Penny, what she can do? Oh, this is now better. I was going to say maybe she can stop sharing so that her sound can be better.
There you are. It's shifted again. The screen.
Must I stop sharing?
Yeah, I
colleagues?
think stopping sharing would be better and not just go through the presentation.
Okay, we will put the presentation then in the chat in the meantime. Lillian, you can commence. Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. Colleagues, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Apologies, it's a bit of a chaotic day, but apologies also for joining in late. I had a link issue, but I'm glad to be here. And just based on the discussion from the colleague from Lifeline, I think it's really important that we have the conversation about the structural barriers. Given the matter, and this is based
Sorry,
on the
Lillian.
that,
Lillian,
yes.
I'm sorry. The sound, I'm not sure if anybody can confirm, but it is not very audible. Colleagues,
There's still
anybody?
a lot of static.
There's
There's
a
still
lot
a
of
lot of
static.
static, Berenice.
Are you able to resolve this, or should we reschedule?
At this point, I've tried moving around. I don't know if we can reschedule or reschedule. Yeah, but I'm really excited of looking forward to this. So I don't know at a time that suits everyone. We'd really like to share this with the collective.
Yeah, my apologies if we cannot. Just a second. I'm just going to take another call, Lillian.
Okay.
Lillian, the feedback I get is that colleagues can hear you. So
Yes,
that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Apologies if some cannot hear me. I just wanted to take colleague, and it's actually just a presentation barriers to reducing barriers when reporting.
Lillian, there's some colleagues are saying they cannot hear it all, some can hear. Sandy, did you want to come in?
From my side, Benny, I can hear her even though, the sound is not perfect. I was thinking that maybe we can just allow her to present so that we can hear what we can hear, but it's worrying that other colleagues are unable. So maybe what we can do is we will try to share. Someone is making a proposal that one of the co-hosts shares her presentation so that people are able to see the presentation. Maybe you can send the presentation to one of us and then we can share it from our side. Thank you so much.
Lillian, I also know that you are, thanks Sandy, pressed for time. I think maybe at this stage, given your time constraints and that some of the colleagues on the platform, it seems some colleagues can hear, others cannot. I cannot hear you at all. I see some chats on the platform indicating that the sound is very bad. They cannot hear you. So unfortunately, I think the best solution is that we reschedule this part of the presentation. Yeah. Also, I'm taking into account your other commitments. So my apologies, and I hope that you can resolve from your side the technical challenges. A message keeps on popping up that your bandwidth is too low for me on my side. So is that in order, Lillian, if we just go ahead and reschedule your presentation?
Yes, ma'am, that is in order. I'm actually just putting it in the text box because I'm attending from the office, so perhaps it's overburdened. So perhaps next time I can attend from home or elsewhere, but I would definitely like to share and engage on the presentation. But that said, again, my apologies and my appreciation for the opportunity to just present to the platform. Apologies once again, colleagues, and thank you very much.
We'll be in contact, Lillian. I've missed some of it, but I'm assuming that you are okay with that. Yeah, I see your message. Sure, we will rearrange that and we will communicate with colleagues in that regard. So we want to then thank you for your time and for taking the trouble and doing your best, and wish you well and release you to attend your next meeting. I will communicate with you about the rescheduling. Thanks, Lillian.
Thank you.
Colleagues, then we will ask, is Dr. Mfulane, if she's ready, maybe to commence. And then, Sibo, can I ask, are you ready for the next part of the program?
Chairperson, good morning and good morning, colleagues. Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, I will hand over now to Dr. Mfulane. Thank you, colleagues. She will provide some commentary on, and then she will raise some key issues that stand out for her from that presentation. And then we will open the floor for comments, questions, contributions. And I will be assisted by Iksan Jawedin and Sandy Oliphant with hands on the platform. Just to alert Dr. Mfulane, if there are any hands, he will both be respondent and facilitate the plenary. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chairperson, and good morning, colleagues. Let me first start by extending my sincere appreciation to the Parliamentary Research Unit in collaboration with the Parliamentary Women's Gender Rights Forum for convening this important session on a matter that is actually very important, not only for women in South Africa, but also for women around the world. As we draw our focus back to the topic for discussion today, around unpacking the structural constraints in the reporting of cases of gender-based violence and femicide, we look to identify the reasons why these constraints still persist. My sincere hope is that through our discussions that will be unfolding here today, we can take the gender transformation agenda forward by coming up with progressive resolutions and proposals for the 7th Parliament, and of course, for all of us to participate in implementing those resolutions. The responsibility, I believe, doesn't only rest with us as women, but we need to engage society broadly to ensure that we bring about transformative change in the lives of ordinary women across and girls across the country. I want to start by appreciating delivered by Ms. Biela, and she has put into context quite a number of key issues that we are dealing with when it comes to constraints in terms of reporting on gender-based violence. Now, the structural deficits that we are currently grappling with, particularly as they affect women and girls, this continues to disproportionately impact women and girls and their quality of life, as we know. And we must also be reminded that we are still grappling with the impact of poverty and inequality and unemployment, with women still, of course, being disproportionately affected. As these structural deficits persist, we also witness a phenomenon of gender regressive norms in our society in South Africa, where the systems that are created to protect women and are built to enable women to seek recourse for the violations of their rights are inherently desensitized and lack the sensitivity and the urgency to enforce women's rights to adequate recourse. And of course, we know that the functioning and the operationalization of these systems and mechanisms are, of course, driven by human beings. And of course, these are people who derive their meaning of identity and sense of urgency around issues of gender-based violence from the communities where they come from, which are still very much deeply patriarchal in nature. And these gender regressive social norms, of course, it is our responsibility as society and all sectors of society, society in general, but of course, all institutions and all civil society organizations and sectors of society have a very important role to play in terms of addressing these issues. When we look at the phenomenon of gender-based violence as a manifestation of a deeper and underlying set of structural deficits, which continue to dictate women's quality of life in South Africa, it becomes incumbent upon all of us to ensure that we make our contribution and we make our voices heard on platforms such as what we are having today. We are, of course, talking firstly about the deeply entrenched remnants of colonialist and imperialist violence that is still meted out against women, not only women in South Africa, but women across the world. We of course know what is happening in Gaza right now. We know of the various wars, the women in Ukraine, what they are dealing with right now. Of course, when wars happen, women are always at the receiving end of violence and rape, and of course, their quality of life being disproportionately impacted on. We are, of course, also, when we're coming back to the South African context, we're talking about the deeply embedded triggers and manifestations of patriarchal violence, which renders women and children vulnerable to all forms of violence and human rights abuses. Through a sustained onslaught against women and children, and this is a culture and a behavior that is still deeply embedded in the fabric of our society. So as we reflect on all of these underlying issues and these drivers, these key drivers of gender-based violence and femicide, it is clear that much more needs to be done to ensure that we meaningfully address these issues, not only through social strategic social compacting, but of course through the policies, key pieces of legislation and the programs that are currently being rolled out by government and civil society working hand in hand. And if we now reflecting on all the gender regressive and gender stagnating social norms that are still with us, these are conditions which perpetuate a retrogressive behaviors in society where we find ourselves continually moving backwards while we take steps moving forward in terms of the laws and the policies that we are endorsing and the laws that are being passed. But there obviously is, a lack of sufficient implementation where we also see across various sections in our society where we keep reverting back to and sustain patriarchal norms of addressing deeply embedded forms of colonial violence and of course, patriarchal violence. It is also important to underscore the fact that in South Africa, women continue to face structural barriers that impede the realization of their human rights due to inadequate access to justice. Women face a number of structural barriers that impede the realization of their human rights, which are either overlooked or not adequately addressed in national laws, policies, and budgets. And Ms. Biela has spoken to some of the constraints that we should be looking at in terms of reviewing existing laws. And of course, in addition to often experiencing secondary victimization when taking up issues such as gender-based violence within the criminal justice system, women face a wide variety of developmental challenges, as Ms. Biela has also indicated, which are meted out under patriarchal, systematically discriminatory socioeconomic norms and traditions, which of course continue to hamper the realization of women's broader inalienable rights as enshrined, of course, in the Constitution and of course the Bill of Rights. Ms. Biela drew our attention to the issue of DNA result testing, which is an important issue for us to address collectively. She talked to us about the challenges we're facing when it comes to accessing DNA results on time in order to ensure convictions. She also reminds us that it takes more than 2 years for the DNA results to come back, and the DNA specimen are only valid for 6 months. And of course, if the waiting period is between 2 to 3 years, by the time you've reached the 6-month period, it means that that DNA sample is no longer valid or viable, and it cannot be used. And of course, what we know is that the results can come back either as inconclusive after the 2-year period. I want to quickly, and of course, you also spoke about the waiting period of rape cases, which is between 3 to 5 years for the court trials, as they, of course, wait for DNA results. We also spoke about cases that are being withdrawn from the courts pending DNA results. And of course, the issue of bail conditions. And she gave us a wide variety of, the unfolding challenges that women are facing within that area and the commitments that were made by the president. I want to juxtapose these inputs that were made by Ms. Biela with some inputs that were made by Justice Kampepe during the 2019 Women's Parliament, where she spoke under the theme Advancing Effective Equality and the Development, Application, Adjudication, Interpretation, and Enforcement of the Law for Women. Justice Kampepe stated that in order to improve women's access to justice, that there must be accessible and affordable legal services for women, particularly women who require support for family law and criminal law related matters. And of course, this includes gender-based violence and related matters. Justice Kampepe also spoke about the fact, the importance of courts employing all efforts to break down patriarchy by implementing measures within the courtrooms that are victim and gender sensitive and prevent secondary trauma and humiliation of survivors by protecting their rights. She also asserted that the justice system must urgently formalize norms that give the necessary protection, respect, and dignity to women during the hearing of these cases. She also further indicated that there must be a standardization of procedures that give effect to these norms across all courts. And of course, as we know, we don't have a standardized procedure when it comes to how the courts handle cases of gender-based violence. She also reiterated that the courts must ensure provisions of survivors of sexual assault and rape to testify on camera or through intermediaries and through anonymization. This is, of course, to inhibit cross-examination of rape survivors by the defense team and to prevent secondary victimization or trauma to victims. She also indicated that the judiciary must strive for better court procedures in order to make the process of seeking justice accessible and trauma-free for women and children as well. She also drew our attention to the fact that the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes had compiled a handbook in 2019 for the judiciary on the effective criminal justice responses to gender-based violence for the benefit of women and girls at large. And then this is, of course, a handbook that we as a country, we don't have that kind of handbook in place to ensure that we begin to address issues of, how the court system deals with, victims of gender-based violence. This speaks to all of the key issues that were raised by Ms. Biela. All of the cases and not have what it is that they are, what exactly, how they can respond, and in order to ensure that they protect themselves. Of course, urgency in terms of addressing violence, also desensitization when it comes to how violence handled across the board, also takes to the implementation. Now, coming back to the issue of this handbook that was drawn up by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, which was compiled in 2019 for the judiciary on the criminal justice justice responses to gender-based violence for the benefit of women and girls. This is, of course, something that we can definitely look into together with some of the very important proposals that are being made by Ms. Viela to ensure that we improve existing legal instruments and the legal frameworks that are available and at our disposal for implementation. The conduct of judges when interacting with survivors has also been highlighted as an important issue in this handbook. And this handbook further provides good practices for judicial training and development and recommends taking a gendered lens when approaching types of cases. I think it is also important for us to, as we reflect on the key proposals and recommendations that have been made by we couldn't get the other presentation from Ms. Mashele because she was talking about, she was outlining some of the key constraints that we actually have to be mindful of, so that as we, even us as Parliament, within this construct of oversight, within the space, the oversight space, so that we can be able to begin to locate those issues on the right platforms, for further actioning, particularly as the sixth dispensation draws to a close and as we begin to prepare for the seventh Parliament. Colleagues, with that said, I think I've just kind of highlighted some of the issues that I think are obviously important, just summarizing some of the that were made by Ms. Viela, and of course, highlighting some of the inputs that were made by Justice Kampepe when it comes to issues of access to justice for women, which is also contained in the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development. I think I would like to pause there for now, but I would like to open up the floor for comments and discussion of the presentation. Key issues that we would like to look at is
Sibo, I'm sorry, it seems that we are losing you. I'm not sure if it's only me, myself.
Okay.
Yeah, there, it's better. Thank you.
Is it better now? Okay.
Yeah, it's better.
So some of the issues that we have to take consideration as we prepare to our based on the
Breaking up again, Sibo.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
That's
yes.
good.
Yes,
Thanks.
ma'am, but you are breaking up. Sorry.
Am I breaking up? Okay. So the issues that we should be focused on.
It's worse now, Sibo.
It's worse.
There it is. There you are now.
Okay. Let's just open up the floor for questions. The floor is open. You are welcome to make your comments and questions by raising your hands, and the colleagues will indicate who has raised their hand to make an input. Are there any hands?
Sibo, I would like to raise my hand. I'm trying to find, while we wait, I'm also trying to find the one. I'm not sure if colleagues are having the same problem where you can raise your hand. I don't see it. I don't know if the rest of the colleagues maybe have the same problem. But in the meantime, colleagues can just, okay, there are raised two hands. I will just wait, but yeah, my hand is also up. Thank you, Sibo. I don't know if you can see, can you just assist us, colleagues? Can you see who the hands are? Colleagues,
Nhlanhla Gidinza.
It's Nhlanhla, myself, and then yourself. 3 hands.
Okay, so can I start with you?
Nhlanhla must have the first bite, please.
Okay. Okay, Bernice, go ahead. Benny, you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that interesting presentation, and thank you, Dr. Mfulane, for pulling out some of those key areas You know, mine doesn't, I'm not sure if it speaks directly to speak directly to, you know, one of the issues for me around gender-based violence, especially involving children. I think that you've identified quite a few gaps in policy around, you know, protecting women and children from gender-based violence. But one of the areas that I've picked up over the years that for me certainly there are as an issue is, and I'm not sure if you can comment, and I think my question is also informed by the slide that you shared of the 12-year-old boy and the image that he drew. That very often in I feel that there are also serious gaps around protecting children when it comes to gender-based violence in schools. I know that, for example, we have policy around when an educator is found, you know, guilty of sexual abuse, gender-based violence against a child. I'm not sure to what extent there is protection when schools appoint service providers. So very often you'll find that schools have extracurricular activities. And those service providers, I'm not sure to what extent they are screened, and if they do commit, you know, an act of violence against a child, whether that is also reported the same as an educator. And I've always felt that that is a weakness in schools, that there at the moment isn't policy that can actually help us prevent violence perpetrated by the service providers. And I feel that's a major gap. So I don't know if you have any, that if you have maybe some of your, if you can share your view on that, and if you've had any experience with violence against a child at school, and what, if you have any recommendations in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Benny. Sandy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much, Semu. Yes, I think from my side, I think I'm also, you know, just traumatized by that image of a 12-year-old boy who is now a perpetrator of gender-based violence. I don't know why it really shocked me to my core to see that a 12-year-old would think that they can rape a granny, basically. It really just shocked me, colleagues. I'm still trying to just wrap my head around that. But I think one of the biggest things that we need to understand, and I'm glad that both Sini and Sim also spoke about this, that, you know, gender power inequality is rooted in patriarchy. And sometimes, you know, people don't want to hear this word patriarchy. Sometimes it's a swear word, but really, gender power inequality is rooted in patriarchy. And that is the driver of gender-based violence. That is the driver. So I think for me, when I was looking at this, it made me think about, as a mother of two boys, my sons are 11 and 10, it made me think about masculinities and the socialization that takes place at home, and how gender, you know, is performed by young children. And, you know, I came across this one researcher who was saying that in South Africa, we have what is called militarized masculinities. And by that, it means boys are expected to be strong, to be brave, to be tough, to be aggressive, and to be violent. And when this researcher was making this assertion, he linked it to our history of apartheid, that this is the violence that we imbibed through that system. But I think, I'm not sure, colleagues, I don't know, maybe more research needs to be done to just understand why we still have this militarized, sort of masculinities in our society. And it reminded me, of an idea that one of my favorite feminists, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, was what she shared in reimagining masculinities. I liked her quotation because she says there, we can remake masculinity. We can remake it. We can remake it from the narrow cage that it forces men into and make it a more human and an expansive idea. I think majority of us who are here on this platform are mothers, fathers, uncles, and aunts. I think it challenges all of us, I think, to understand that we have a role in reshaping, masculinity in South Africa. We need to move from these toxic hegemonic masculinities that we see in our society. And we need to be the people who stand up to challenge them whenever they rear their heads. We shouldn't be the one, when we see the boy child, when he's trying to express his emotion, you tell your boy child that boys don't cry. We shouldn't be those people. We shouldn't, colleagues. So I would like us to challenge ourselves personally to be people who will always stand up against gender-based violence whenever we see it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Sansa, go ahead. Sansa, are you there? Okay, Nawal.
Hi, can you guys hear me clearly?
I can hear you. Go ahead, Nawal.
Yes.
Okay, so one point is a question and the other one I think is a suggestion. So you were making a reference to the UN booklet, right? I just wanted to find out what is the possibility that we could have sort of a task group that look at a similar booklet for South Africa, maybe based on their what the booklet entails on the UN side. That's number one. Number two, the previous speaker spoke in her presentation about the review of the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 13 of 21. I also recently had an opportunity to work on the Child Act of 74 of 1983. And if I look at Chapter 8, it speaks to various unlawfulness towards children. This is only based on children's violent acts at the moment, right? So I was thinking, instead of just focusing on one act or on one policy, maybe we could incorporate some of these form of assistance in this particular act, the Child Act of 74 as well, where it speaks to the role of the court. What is acceptable in the case of rape. Maybe just to strengthen the argument as to the possibilities of taking these matters serious instead of having to listen to these horrific acts. These violent acts are even happening in the court cases, So that were the 2 points that I wanted to bring across. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nawal. And Nhlanhla?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was educational from my side. It who's not regularly in this kind of field. I have 2 points question, because we are somehow involved in community forums and such information. I think it will be more useful in such platforms, including that we are working closely with some of the law enforcement agencies, and we have an extended network of family members who are in the health profession, so that at least we start making a difference one bit at a time. So, for example, at a community level, to what extent are facilities reached out to, so that they are enabled to assist victims of, let's say, for example, rape, like children, to open these cases? Because some of these things you might find that they are not happening, and on the ground, it's not that people do not want to, but it's because they are not equipped to normalize, like, the capacitation of healthcare workers to assist underage children that are victims. For example, in some of what I've observed here in Western Cape, what happens in some of the districts is actually driven from communities that ends up becoming part of the standard operating procedures of facilities that fall within that district. So I understand that there's approach from the national level, but I think we would have been able to cover some ground while waiting for the national level to get things declared or move a little bit. And the second one, it's on the point that was shared that GBV survivors do not get the copy of the bail conditions that maybe were given to the perpetrators, so that maybe, because some of the people are our extended friends who are in the prosecutorial space and head of some of these facilities, who's supposed to have the copy, so that at least we know when we meet in this forum that this becomes one of the things that is normalized. Yeah, I'm more on the practical things that I can do as an individual from the problems that are identified. And yeah, if maybe I can be helped on that, it will end up helping other people in the chain or in the network that I'm in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I think I will hand over to Ms. Biela now to respond to the issues raised, and I will we can replicate that on our side. Over to you, Ms. Biela.
Thank you, Dr. Sambulani, and thank you to all the participants, and thank you for your good questions and good comments and points that you've made. Also, Dr. Sambulani, the points you've made, in particular with that booklet. Also, I'm very keen in actually seeing that booklet and read it. I think it's very important. I will start with the question of Berenice about the schools and the school policy and the procedures in terms of dealing or protecting children. I haven't, I know that in terms of child protection services, all of us as institutions that work with children, we're supposed to vet all staff that should be working closely with children. So schools, they should be vetting their security guards, the people like this, the general staff, or people that are coming to deliver stationery or coming to deliver food. Those people should be vetted just to see that they're not pedophiles, they're not actually having any cases of child abuse against them. But on paper, they should be doing it. And the question is it being done or not? And I think you've raised a good point to say you're not sure whether it's being done. I know of a few cases where security guards at the school had actually sexually assaulted Elena. And I know that in those instances, you find that the company will just fire that person and bring another police officer to work in the school, but it doesn't really resolve the problem because nobody is vetting the service providers that are coming to the schools. Even with the procedure for the teachers, while it's there on paper, but I can tell you now, Bernice, a lot of schools, they do cover up. They cover up when they know that the teacher might be in trouble. They will collude and they will actually cover up, which is very concerning. That sometimes these incidences are not dealt with the way it should be dealt with. And it's something that Department of Education really needs to look at it closely and maybe make other avenues of reporting such incidences, that it does not only go through the school governing body and the principal, because sometimes that's where the cover up happens, because when it's out there, the school names gets affected. So sometimes they want to deal with it as an internal issue so that the name of the school doesn't get affected. But I agree with you that the policy should be expanded. And I think for me, again, it's the implementation, whether those people are vetted or not, that are entering the school gate. It's a big question. In terms of the boy, the 12-year-old boy, there were a lot of other pictures that he drew. Actually, I was just showing one, but the last one that he drew, it was a picture of a younger boy with a knife on his heart. So when counseling sessions continued, it was discovered that that boy himself was raped many times as a child. So he was basically groomed for a few years before he started doing it. So I think it speaks volumes in terms of how in communities boys are neglected, because parents always think boys are safe. They will always look for the girl child and make sure she doesn't go too far because all these bad things will happen to her. But we see new trends where boy children are being targeted and parents don't even see that the boy child has been targeted. So apparently, yes, when it came out because now he was labeled as a perpetrator. But when counseling sessions were going on, it was discovered that in fact, he was a victim himself of rape. He was a victim himself of sexual grooming, and he was groomed by gangs. It wasn't even one person that groomed this boy. It was actually, and it speaks to families that at times are in a way dysfunctional because parents were alcoholics, they were never there, and they never saw what was happening to this boy. But we are seeing few cases where boys are being targeted because of that whole socialization that we think they're safe and we do less in terms of protecting them, which is actually very scary. And it's a message that really needs to go out there, and we really need to make sure that boys are protected. And I think, Sandy, that was something that was really troubling you. And I think it really speaks to the sexual grooming of children and how that actually goes on quietly within the families, and it goes on quietly within the communities. And then we see a bigger problem at a later stage, and we wonder what happened here. But our boy children, we really need to make sure that they are protected, and they are equally protected as the girl child. I think gone are the days where we should only be worrying about the girl child. We should be worrying about the boy child as well. And he's apparently not the only one. We have few cases of young boys that have been labeled as perpetrators because they've either raped small children, or they have, in this case, this boy case was unique because he targeted an elderly woman, the granny, because also that granny lived with disability. So you can also see already in his head, he's got this whole thing of power and control. Because that granny lived with a disability, he knew that he might overpower this granny because the granny couldn't walk or run properly, and that's why we're targeting him. So again, the patriarchal thing, you could see how, because he's been raised by this gang or groomed by this gang, he has adopted all the patriarchal attitude and behaviors that are actually absolutely inappropriate. But we need to keep in mind that because he was victimized himself and there was no support that was given to him, he was left alone, and only we find out when he was 12 that he went through this. Then in terms of the case with policies that needs to be strengthened in order to make sure that I think it was Nawal that had mentioned something good about the policies that she worked with, and how we need to try and make sure that all our policies, in a way, they speak to each other, because that, again, it's another gap that it's there in the system. Sometimes you find that policies that are within Department of Health, they're not the same as what the Children's Act is saying, and it's not the same with this other act there that it's saying. So there is a big gap, and we still need to find a way of making sure that all our policies or all our laws actually talks to each other and support each other. So I agree with you, Nawal, on that point, that we really need to strengthen these policies and strengthen the argument as to why it needs to be done in a certain way. And yes, we need to also look at that book. If the book tells or gives key information and points in terms of the judiciary system and how they should deal with gender-based violence cases, we definitely need a similar one in South Africa, because we've seen a lot of gaps in the judiciary system, and we've seen a lot of trauma and secondary victimization that happens to gender-based violence survivors, which just puts them off. That when we talk to them about opening cases and going to court, it's something that honestly they don't want to do, because they don't see how the judiciary system is going to assist them with this process. For Nhlanhla, the question around, I think there's a question that also Bernice asked about the facilities. Or was it Nhlanhla? I'm not sure now who asked the question about, I think it was Nhlanhla, the facilities at the local level, whether they are equipped to deal with cases of rape. Unfortunately, Nhlanhla, the answer is not quite. Most of the times, the local clinics, when they come across a rape case, they do refer them to hospitals, and they do refer those rape cases. Most hospitals have crisis centers, which is a separate kind of like section that deals with rape survivors, or some hospitals have Thuthuzela care centers. Of course, we have only few Thuthuzela care centers in South Africa, and they all under NPA. They are being managed by NPA, which is One Stop, where survivors go in and get all services. So that is an ideal situation that it would be nice to have, but we also understand that as a country with our financial constraints, we're not going to be having all these Thuthuzela care centers everywhere. But it's very important that at a local level, and I feel that not with the facility like the clinics only, I feel that at a local level, teachers, police officers, nurses, social workers, all these people, when they're studying towards their careers, whether when police are being trained to become police, there should be a built-in component of gender-based violence in their courses. Because if all of them are trained right from the beginning, at least they will know the signs, they will know how to respond to the survivor of gender-based violence. They will also follow some of the simple steps that needs to be done in order to support. What is currently happening, whether people are doing nursing or they are studying police or social work, there is a big gap. While we're crying that the sketch is so high, but our training institutions haven't factored in that they must build courses on gender-based violence. It must be part of the curriculum for teachers, for everybody, because then that's how everybody will have enough information and they will know what to do. So we have instances where clinics will send a child back home with Panado because the nurse didn't think it was a big problem, that the child seems to have all these things. Then we have ones that know better, that refer to a hospital. So I think that comment is very good, but I feel in order to address it in one go, we really need to look at making sure that all training institutions incorporate gender-based violence as one of their modules. Then in terms of bail conditions, it is a big issue because between the SAPS services and the NPA, the prosecutors, nobody wants to take responsibility as to who's supposed to give the conditions to the survivor. And for us, it's another undermining attitude of the survivor owns the case. So both SAPS and NPA have a legal duty to actually give this information to the survivors. But one section points the other section as wrong. So eventually it doesn't get done. And I don't think it's written anywhere to say whose responsibility it is to give this information. We know survivors talk a lot with the detectives who are investigating the case. So it makes sense that the police should really be giving this information to the survivor, but they're saying it's not their responsibility. But we're also aware that survivors do go to court. So how hard it is for the prosecutor to give that copy while the survivor is at court on that day. So I think for me, it's a gap that both parties need to really, I think they need to understand that it's their responsibility. If the police didn't give, then the prosecutor should be giving, but they can't be pointing fingers and say it's not my responsibility, and at the end of the day, it doesn't get done. I feel that to fight the scourge of gender-based violence, it needs all of us, it needs all departments, it needs so many of us to actually pull towards the same direction. So when we're pointing fingers and say it's not my problem, I didn't do this, or this person was supposed to do it, but it doesn't get done at all. And also it's not affecting one survivors in one area. This is a national problem that bail conditions, survivors don't get a copy. It's worldwide, it's sad. And it's something that we really need to look at and address as a country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Biela, for your responses. I think in conclusion, of touching, I want to start with what.
Sibo, can you just, sorry, sound issue again? Are you able to move closer?
Move closer, okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay,
Good.
so
Yeah,
the issue of how we socialize our children, it's obviously the issue of gender-based violence it's broadly at its core, it's an issue of patriarchy, it's a societal issue, it's an issue that cuts across all institutions, all sectors of society. Even in the workplace, women experience gender-based violence. If it's not physical, it's going to be at a psychological level. There's always an onslaught against women. The women and girls face across all platforms of society. And as we've heard now as well from the inputs that were made by Ms. Biela, boy children are also becoming vulnerable, as of course we are focusing more on putting measures in place to protect the girl child. Boy children are being groomed and they then perpetuate that cycle. But there obviously is a need for us to ensure that we begin to deal with the issue at its core and the root causes and the key drivers of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa is, of course, we know the history where we come from. We're talking about a colonialist violence meted against, that has been meted out against women over the years, over hundreds of years. We're talking about the impact, the high level, the deeply embedded impact of colonialist violence and patriarchal violence, which we, of course, are still dealing with the remnants of. And of course, as we're looking at what we're discussing today, issues around, the barriers. The barriers, of course, that we are dealing with an issue. We're dealing with the manifestation after a crime has been committed. So, of course, there's a need for us to strengthen the instruments in place as we are dealing with crimes that have already been committed. But of course, there's a need for us to ensure that we employ or bring on board all sectors of society. There's a need for us to that we enable a multi-sectoral collaboration, multi-departmental collaboration so that we bring in all the relevant stakeholders and the relevant role players. And we're talking from society, the police, social development, basic education, higher education, us in the workplace, the role of parliament, the important role that is being played by the justice system in terms of how they handle cases of gender-based violence, and of course, strengthening the legal instruments that are at our disposal to ensure that even when after crimes have been committed that relate to sexual offences and broadly gender-based violence, we have the appropriate mechanisms and systems in place so that we protect the dignity, that we protect women, and so these matters are handled in a simplified manner. But with that said, I also want to quickly respond to the issue, the proposal that was made by Nawal, and I think Ms. Biela also agreed that perhaps there is a need for us to put a task team together that can begin, where we can begin to unpack all of these issues. We can begin to put a similar handbook together that will assist specifically the justice system, because we know that there is a vacuum there. They don't have a handbook in place at the moment. So it is incumbent upon us so that we put those kind of proposals forward. And from my side, working in the space of sector parliaments, this issue, the issues around gender-based violence and the broadly the gender transformation agenda, it's a critical component of the work that we do, and in the Office of the Deputy Chairperson, obviously in collaboration with various other stakeholders across the three spheres of government, civil society, the Planning Commission, the UNDP, the UN, various others very important structures that have a very important role to play in terms of providing us with the data, but also coming up with advanced proposals to ensure that we continue to refine and improve the systems at our disposal. So I think that what I can do from my side is to definitely take proposals that Ms. Biela has put on the table, and to put that on the agenda as well from an oversight perspective as we begin to, because we are at the moment refining, we are looking at what our oversight agenda should be focusing on in the seventh Parliament. So I would like to propose that this should not be the last engagement that we're having around these issues, and specifically issues around your DNA testing facilities. That is an issue that is actually quite critical as well. I mean, we know that there are buildings available. Public Works has got buildings across all 9 provinces. We know that there's the NSI that has been passed as well. There's a opportunity to facilitate collaboration as well when it comes to testing, and making sure that your DNA testing results are actually delivered at the turnaround time is quicker. So there's so much more that we can do in terms of looking at avenues of how we can ensure that all 9 provinces are able to have facilities where use of testing facilities are available, for victims, and to ensure that there's justice for those who have been violated. But with that said, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank the research unit, the forum as well, for the impeccable work. And I would like to thank you all for your participation, and of course for the opportunity to engage and to share insights and ideas. With that said, thank you very much. I would like now to hand over to Ms. Berenice Paulse to take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for a really amazing session. To our participants, to our panelists, thank you, colleagues, for the sharing your expertise and your experience. And I think we've learned quite a lot. I am happy to see on the platform today to recognize that we also have colleagues from the providing support to their respective committees, justice, police, education, social development on the panel, on the platform. My apologies. And colleagues, I would like to encourage you to look at some of those recommendations and the issues that Ms. Biela raised to inform your own oversight agenda of your committees. And I'm also grateful for some of the commitments made by by Dr. Mfulane. And we know that she occupies a critical space in the institution, based in the Deputy Chairperson's office, and we appreciate her commitments to supporting this going forward. We will then also just say, I want to just say that having Ms. Biela's presentation for me, there's one thing that stands out, is that some of those changes that need to happen are really small. I mean, I cannot understand why it would take so long, or it hasn't been resolved. Who gives the bail conditions to the complainant or the survivor? I mean, that is something really, and so I think, colleagues, let's keep in mind that some of these changes do not require significant financial investment or resources. These are very small. The issue around the barcode to prioritize cases involving young children. Those are small changes. We just need to encourage departments to resolve this amongst themselves. And certainly because we occupy the oversight space, we are in the position to support women and children, survivors of gender-based violence, through our knowledge that we have of what is happening in reality. And we thank you, Lifeline Pietermaritzburg. We also want to acknowledge the representative from the Escort Crisis Center on the platform as well. We thank you for sharing your practical, sharing with us the practical realities. And I think that's really one of the most excellent ways in which we truly know what's happening in reality versus what legislation and policy dictates. With this, I would like to hand over to the gender focal point for the Women's Forum, Sandisa Oliphant, for closure and way forward. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Oliphant.
Okay. Thank you so much, colleagues. I don't think I want to waste further time, but I just want to say thank you so much to all involved for such a robust conversation. I think it's been really eye-opening and very educational, and it's sincerely appreciated. And we know that colleagues must be suffering from exhaustion because for the past 2 weeks, it's been policy workshops, almost every day. So colleagues, your time here today is sincerely appreciated. But I think in closing, in terms of the way forward, I think we've agreed that we'll continue with this focus on gender-based violence and the manifestation of patriarchal violence in April, and we'll invite all the stakeholders back. And we are sincerely grateful to all the committees as committee supports, as Benedis has said, and we are hoping that this will also land in terms of the recommendations for policy and legislative amendments in their committees, so that we can really see the change that we're seeking in society. And we are, as the Women and Gender Rights Forum, planning a webinar sometime in the new financial year on masculinities. We are inviting, all interested men who want, to be our allies to this webinar. But we are hoping that Lifeline again, who is our very strategic partner, will join us again for this. But I think one of the biggest highlights for me today was the call to compile a handbook similar to the one that the UN has. I think it's very important, colleagues. So thank you so much for your time, and we will invite you again next time. Thank you, colleagues, and bye.
Thank you so much, colleagues. Good day further.
Thank you, colleagues. We will now adjourn this session. Have a good day.
Bye, colleagues.